record. So I will be recording the session and sending out a video of it afterwards with, so what I hope are helpful links during the session. So without further ado, let's get started. So today we're doing part 1 of Advanced Qualtrics. I'm going to be talking about quotas, loop and merge, and then how to use authentication for your surveys. So again, this is what we're talking about today. Quotas are something that allows you to keep track of how many people or respondents are meeting a particular condition that you set in your survey. And then we also have loop and merge. So loop and merge is very useful if there's particular parts of your survey that you like to repeat, depending on how a respondent answered further up in the beginning of your survey. And I'll kind of demonstrate what that is if I'm not explaining it that great. And then authentication. You can actually, if you're sending out a survey specifically to people at Weill Cornell, you can actually automatically collect identifiers like their name, their seaweed, their email, just by doing a few things in the survey flow so that you don't have to, necessarily ask that question in your survey. You just kind of collect it. So before we begin, again, this is a more advanced Qualtrics technique. So it already assumes that you know how to create pretty basic surveys and analyze the data in Qualtrics. So unfortunately, feel free to stay if you're not, too familiar with Qualtrics, but I won't necessarily be going through the steps of how I created surveys. I'm using pre-created surveys for this to just demonstrate the features that I mentioned earlier. And as always, if you need Qualtrics help, again, I'm here to help you, but the Qualtrics support site is actually very, very good. I use it all the time when I have questions. They do actually put use case scenarios up as well to give you kind of step-by-step help on how to do some of these things that I'm going to be showing you today. So that's a very short presentation because I just kind of want to get into the demo. So if you'll give me a minute to switch over to my browser. Bridget, I just want to make sure that you can see Qualtrics.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me get rid of that and make sure my email doesn't interrupt our session. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to be going through a few use case scenarios today. I've had to do all the things I just mentioned earlier. Granted, I can't go through every use case scenario, but I'm going to try to go through the ones that we get asked about a lot. So if you have any questions about how to do other things, I can definitely try to help towards the end of it. But I can also help you, after the session too. If you have questions, you can shoot me an email after this. So let's start with quotas. Again, they let you keep track of how many respondents meet a condition in your survey, and they help you gather only the exact amount of data that you need for, a survey or a particular study that you're doing. One thing about quotas is that they're not always foolproof. Sometimes you might get a situation where, let's say you put a quota of 100 for a particular survey that you're doing, and you go back to check to see if the quota has been met, and you might see that 101 respondents, submitted your survey, and you're like, how did that happen? I had a quota of 100. There are instances where, 2 people or more might submit a survey at the same time, and Qualtrics keeps all of that information. So if it's submitted simultaneously towards the end of your quota, you might see that there's like a tiny bit more respondents than you had, anticipated. And you can decide what to do with that little bit of overage. You can, delete it if you don't need it, or you could just keep it as extra data. It's really up to you. But, those are, kind of not too common scenarios where you might have just a tiny little bit of overage, but that's the reason why, essentially. So let's start with the simplest quota that you can do, all right? Which is basically, you have a survey and you want a total number of respondents for the whole entire survey. And I've got a very basic survey up. It's got like a description at the top and then 1 question. Obviously, you could do more questions, but for the sake of this example, we're just going to do the 1. So how do you even set up quotas in Qualtrics? So it's really easy. Under Tools, you will see an option called Quotas. So I'm going to click on that, and you can add a quota. You'll see that I have none set up currently. So I'm going to add one for today. All right. I have a default count of 100, which I can change. And then I have, it's just called new quota. If I double click on that, I can name it anything I want, which is very useful if you're using multiple quotas for one survey. I highly recommend that you change the names of them so you know what you're actually counting. So I'm just gonna call this one total responses. And just so I don't have to click through this survey 100 times, I'm gonna make my quota 3 just to, show you how it's gonna work. So increment the quota, this is our condition, when a response is submitted that meets the following conditions. So for a quota to be met, generally the person taking the survey has to submit the entire survey, for it to work, for it to count, essentially, in the counter here. So I'm gonna set up a condition, right? And if you're doing a quota for a survey where you just need a total number of responses, you usually want to set up a condition on a question that everybody has to take. Maybe it's like a demographic one, like what's your name and phone number, stuff like that. Everybody has to take that question. Or what I like to do is actually use the descriptive text that I usually have at the beginning of every survey I take that explains what the survey is. Everybody has to see that. So I just use that, to be honest. So in this case, my condition is going to be when the question, the first one actually, which is just the descriptive text explaining what the survey is. So I have to pick the question again. And when it's just displayed, right? When it's just on the screen displayed, it's going to count as somebody taking the survey once they hit submit, all right? So that's my condition for basically setting a total number of responses. So then I have to decide, well, what happens when I meet my quota? What happens to the survey? So there's a little drop-down menu right here. And I've got a ton of basically options here. One is that I could just end the current survey. I don't really want to do this option because that means that the person was already in the survey and then it ends. So I actually just want to prevent them from taking the survey at all once the quota is met. So that would actually be option number 2. You could also do a bunch of other things, which I'll get into some of these later, but depending on if your quota is met, you can decide that a certain question isn't displayed, maybe an entire block of your survey isn't shown, depending on if your quota is met. And then you can also trigger a web service, which is basically bumping somebody out to another website, let's say. Maybe it has more information about why they can't take the survey. And then what I'm going to show you later today, you can set no, actions, and then use skip logic or survey flow later on so that you can use the quota to kind of fiddle and customize your survey even more. So I'm going to show you this particular one in a little bit. But right now, I just want to prevent all new survey sessions. When I hit 3 responses total, nobody else can take this survey. So that's what I'm going to pick. All right. You can also create a custom inactive survey message. So what happens is when 3 people take the survey and then number 4 tries to take the survey, when they click on that link for the survey, they'll get a little kind of canned response from Qualtrics saying like, oh, this quota has already been met. Thanks for trying anyway. I mean, it's worded a little better, but that's the default. You can actually customize it if you would like by clicking this little option here, this little checkbox. And then you can go into your own library. So you pick the one with your name on it. And you can either select a message that you've already written or just create a new one. And then you get like a kind of a word looking pop-up where you can type any message you want and hit save. And that would be the message that appears when they meet the quota. So I'm not going to do a custom survey message in this one because I want you to see what the default one looks like. So I'm going to click out of that. And anytime you create a quota, you just hit save. Okay. And anytime you do a quota, if you've added it after the fact and you've already published a survey, you need to hit publish again to make sure that the quota is counted. So I'm going to publish a survey with the quota. All right. So now I kind of want to test my quota. All right. So I'm going to get this survey link. All right. Okay, so this is displayed, so it's going to count when I take it. So how do you pronounce the term GIF, GIF? You have to pick. So I'm just going to pick 3 random responses. Submit one more time. Let's do response number 3. All right, so I tried to take the survey a 4th time, and this is the canned response. This survey has reached its quota and responses are no longer being solicited. Again, if I had clicked that little check mark to customize the survey message, I could change this to anything that I want. I can, put a URL there so that they can get more information, be a little more grateful maybe in the message saying, oh, thank you, for doing it anyway. But, that's how you would do the most basic quota, where you just want to get a certain number of responses and that's it. So let me go back into the survey. One second, let me hide this. Okay, so I can see a little better. All right, perfect. So let me go back where the quota is. Tools, quotas. So you can see that I've met my quota here. I've met 3 out of 3, okay? But let's say that this is a survey that I do for a research study maybe once a quarter, and I want to reuse it, but I've met the quota. So can I reset it? Yes. So all you have to do is hit reset, and it sets the counter back to 0. If you're in the middle of a survey and you decide that you want to, add more, to the quota itself, you can just change it at any time, but you'll have to republish the survey in order for that quota to then, be submitted for your survey. You can also change this number here. So let me go back really quick, hit save again, hit publish. And I'm going to take this survey really, really quick, just so I have 1 on the counter. All right, so let me go back into my survey. Quotas. Okay, so I've got this 1, right? I can also change the 1 to anything I want by double clicking it. And usually what that does, oh, it does not want to listen to me today. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't want me to do it today. But normally what you can do is you can double click on the number here and set the number that you want yourself. So I can make this 2 or I can make this 3. But there are scenarios where you might want to do that. Let's say you had the survey, already published, people are actively taking it, and then you realize you wanted a quota afterward. So all you have to do is just click this number and then add that number in there, the number of people who might have already taken your survey, to make sure that it meets the quota, all right? And then anytime you make a change to your quota, you just hit save, all right? There are other options here. You can move a quota up and down. That's usually more helpful when you've got more quotas, which I'll have in a second. You can rename them, you can copy them, or you can delete a quota. If you're gonna delete a quota, Qualtrics gets very, finicky, and it wants you to make sure that you know what you're doing, that there's certain data that will change in your data analysis and your reports. So you have to really make sure that you want to delete it and actually type in the word delete to get rid of the entire quota, all right? There's also a really cool feature over here, if you just move over, where it says default quota group. There's actually a cool little tab that says public quota dashboard. So this might be useful, if you're creating a study and you've got, a large quota, let's say 1,000, and you have other people in your team and they want to know if the quota has been met, but they don't have necessarily back-end access to this survey. You can actually give them a public quota dashboard so they can just see it, and give them this link, and they can see anytime how the quota is doing at any given point in time, essentially. So that's just a cool little trick, so that if they don't have this access to the survey, you can always make sure that they see some progress of how it's going. All right, let's do a different type of quota. All right, so sort of similar. I have a quota here. or I have a survey here where I have the same question as the last survey, and then I have a follow-up question on a separate block that's following this question here. So what I want to do in a survey, and this is the use case scenario, right now I have two options here. I want to set up a scenario where, let's say I need 50 respondents to answer this question and 50 respondents to answer this question, and then when I get those responses, the survey shuts down entirely. All right. In a real life scenario, maybe it's something like you need 100 female respondents and 100 male respondents or something like that. So this is how you'd set up multiple quotas. So I'm going to go into my tools, again, quotas, and I've got one set up for GIF already. I'm going to go in there right now. So I have a quota set up for the first question. How do you pronounce the term GIF, GIF? And if they select the first option, then the survey ends, right? Because I only want, let's say, 3 in this one, just to make it a little easier. But I also need one for the second option. So I'm just gonna add another quota. And I'm just gonna name this one GIF. Same count. GIF question. Now I'm gonna pick the second option, and I'm gonna end the survey this time, because I don't necessarily, if I meet the quota, I don't necessarily want them to continue to the second follow-up question. If I've met my quota, they don't need to keep taking the survey, all right? So I'm gonna hit save. And again, Qualtrics likes to remind you you've made changes, you should publish, so that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so now let me test this out. So I'm gonna try to trigger this option right here by taking it 3 times, okay? So 1, and I have my follow-up. I can pick whatever color I want. 2, I'll pick another color this time, doesn't matter. And 3. Oh, all right. So let me try to take the survey a 4th time with this option, okay? And see if I can move forward. Remember, Qualtrics is slowly collecting the data, so if I do go over 1, it's because it hasn't like caught up yet. So let me try it one more time. Oh, see, I can't move on to the second one because I've met my quota. But I could have done the second option where I do a soft J as in jar, and I could have continued on with the survey. So again, let me go back into my survey, go to the quotas. So again, it's counting it as 4 because I tried to get in, but it did block me from taking the rest of the survey. So you would see that in the data, and you could decide if you wanted to delete this or not. But essentially, if you want to have a survey where there's a limited amount of respondents and you need like a 50-50, or you could work this with as many as you want, you would basically choose the condition of that question is selected, and then you would end it so that they can't continue further on. Again, as far as survey setup goes, usually if I have a quota for a situation like this, I make sure that it's separated in its own block, and then everything follows after it, okay? Because if these were together essentially and not separated in their own blocks, people could still technically take this next question and then hit submit, and I keep going over quota over and over and over again. So I want to make sure that they meet this condition first, and then Qualtrics does the kind of logic for me and decides, did they meet quota yet? If they have, they don't get to go here, but if they haven't, they do. So that's how that setup works. Let me do one more quota scenario before I move on. So this is a question I get asked a lot, actually. And it is, there we go. So the question is, I have an event and I want to send out a survey so people can RSVP for this event. And there are multiple days that they can choose from. But the catch is each date has a cap of how many people can attend that particular session. So how can I send out a survey and make sure that they don't go over the cap for that particular day? So that requires a couple of things. First, we've got our quota, right? And let me actually delete these and do it from scratch. right. And this one, perfect. All right, so we're gonna add a quota. So what you need to do is if your event has a cap for each day, you need to, one, decide what that cap is, and then set a quota for every single day that you have as an option. So again, I'm gonna do 3 this time. We're gonna call this one day 1, and we're gonna do, our condition is, we got question 1, which day do you prefer? If they select day 1, we're gonna try this now. We're not gonna have Qualtrics do any action right now for this. We're gonna use logic in order to do this, all right? So I've got day 1. I just have to repeat it for all the other days that I have. And in this case, I set up the survey to have 3 days, all right? So same thing, which day do you prefer? Instead, I'm gonna do day 2. Again, skip logic. 1 more. All right, which day do you prefer? They select day 3. Logic again. So I'm gonna hit save now. All right, now I have to go here, okay? So for each day, I now have to do display logic and make it basically like a logic puzzle so that day 1 appears so long as it hasn't met the quota yet. So when you do that, you select the day, and in the drop down, you have add display logic. I'm gonna put remove so you could see it from the beginning. So add display logic, and these are the conditions that need to be met. So we're not gonna do a question, we're actually gonna do the quota this time. So the quota is day 1 has not been met. And the reason we're doing that is this day only displays if the quota for day 1 has not been met. Otherwise, it'll disappear, all right? And you just do that to all of them, which I believe I already did, but I'm gonna double check. Yep, day 2, and the quota for day 3. Let me just double check that first one. Yep, all right, so we're ready to go. I'm gonna publish this again. Perfect. So now I'm gonna take the survey and test it out. Whoop, 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 whoop. I think I had quotas there. 1 second. Has not been met. There we go. All right. That should fix it. Always good to test these. All right, so let me go back into the survey. Perfect. All right, so now let's try the quota out. Which day do you prefer? I'm gonna do day 1 3 times because that's my quota for this. I'm about to reach my cap. All right, so that was 3 times. What happens now? Oh, let's see. It might not have tested yet. I might be going too fast for it. Yeah, I was going a little too fast for it to think. But now, since I've reached my cap, I only see these days as available. So now, when people continue to take the survey, they don't even realize that, you know, day 1 is missing, because normally it would just be an actual date, and they can just pick anything that's left that's on your survey. So that's how basically setting up a quota with logic works. So those are like 3 of the kind of biggest scenarios that we see. Bridget, do we have any questions before I move on to loop and merge about quotas?
Yeah, we just got one in from Leshia. Okay, she says, hi, thanks for holding this session. Quick question, is there a way to cross out or lighten the font of the survey option when the quota for that particular option has been met, as opposed to having the option disappear? Cool question.
I don't think that there is, because the only logic that's available, so let me go back into the survey. So when you add logic, there's only 2 types really for Qualtrics, which is display and skip. So you can only decide if something shows up on the screen or if like Qualtrics forces the respondent to skip over it. But as far as formatting goes, there's not really a way to gray it out successfully. it's just better to have it disappear, I would think, because if it's grayed out and they keep clicking it, they're not going to understand necessarily why. So I would just have it gone entirely. But that's just, my personal opinion. Any other questions, Bridget?
Not at the moment. Anybody else have questions? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you do.
Well, I'm going to move on just for the sake of time. So I'm going to move on to loop and merge, which is actually a really cool feature that's in Qualtrics. So I get this scenario actually a few times a year, which is I'll have a physician approach me and say, hi, so we have residents in our program, and at the end of a specific time period, we need them to basically provide feedback on what their experience was like working with particular faculty members. But the problem comes down to, what if they have worked with multiple people, multiple faculty in our department? Do I have to then create a block of questions for every single physician if we've got like 20, 25? That's going to be like 100 question survey. It's going to be a lot of branching. Do I have to do that? And they look scared when they ask. And the answer is no. There's actually a really cool feature called loop and merge, where you can just repeat parts of your survey over and over automatically and keep it relatively short. So I've got two questions here, or two blocks rather of questions. One is, which faculty members have you worked with this quarter? Please select all that apply. So I've got a multiple choice question, but they can select as many as they want. And I've got some doctors that you may be familiar with, although I don't think they work here. And then I have a second block of questions. And this is a block of questions that I want repeated, which is, when they pick a physician from up here, the name shows up here, and then they just take it as many times as, depending on the number of physicians they actually pick. All right. So that's what loop and merge does. So this is the block that I want repeated. So how do I turn on loop and merge? It's actually here under block options. So I'm going to click here, and then you see it right there as an option. And then this cool menu pops up. You always have to turn it on for some reason. So I'm going to do that. And then I have to set up a condition like I did with quotas. So I want to loop this block based off of this question here. Which faculty members have you worked with? And I want this to repeat depending on which one of these. So it's actually whatever they end up selecting. I can actually have them go through the entire thing if I want to, or things that I just have displayed on the screen because of, whatever logic that I may have set up, even unselected choices. But in this case, it makes sense that whoever they pick from question one, they'll loop through multiple times for the block. So you'll notice that field one has now been filled in with all the physicians, which is fine. That's all I want. So now I'm just going to hit save. All right. Okay. So one other step we need to do is, I'm going to go into this question, and instead of a blank, I want the actual doctor's name to show up. So I am going to use a cool tool. I don't know if you've all used it, but pipe text is amazing. Pipe text just takes data from any part of your survey and funnels or pipes it into another part of your survey. So in this case, I want to pipe the name of the doctor here, pipe text. All right. So highlighting this, pipe text, I'm going to go to loop and merge. This is what we're doing now. And I'm going to go to the fields that I just created in that loop and merge menu that we had before. And I'm going to take all the doctors' names essentially. All right. So it gives me this weird little code. I'm going to delete the rest of this line here. And I just put an apostrophe S because it's a possessive question. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. Highlight this, add the pipe text, loop and merge, and field number one that had all their names. I'm going to delete that. And we're good. So let's see how this actually works. All right, which faculty members have I worked with? Let's say I worked with Dr. House and Dr. Quinn. All right. So look, it's put Dr. House's name where I put that little code because that's who I selected. All right. So how would you rate Dr. House's professionalism? Well, I don't know if anyone's ever watched House, but he's very unprofessional. So that's how I'm rating him. And how would I rate his quality of teaching? I mean, he's very hands-on, I guess. He throws you into difficult situations. Maybe it's neither good or bad. He's still kind of a jerk. So I'm going to answer or rate Dr. House. And then I'm going to move on and hope that I get Dr. Quinn now. Yep, so there's Dr. Quinn. They just put her name in because that's who I selected. So how would I rate Dr. Quinn? She's a pioneer medical woman. She's very professional. And how would I rate her quality of teaching? I mean, some of her methods are outdated, but I guess she's a good teacher. She's somewhat good, I guess. And then I'm gonna move on. I didn't pick any other doctors, so the survey has ended and my response has been recorded. So that's how you could use loop and merge to essentially save yourself a ton of work building surveys, and just repeat a few sections based on how somebody answered in the beginning. So let me go back and show you one other example of loop and merge that I think is actually really cool. So I have this research study, and in my research study, I ask, how many children do you have? So I want to do a loop and merge based on a numerical value that somebody puts in this field, all right? And then in this field, the follow-up question, or rather in the block, I want to ask, what is the age of your blank child? Meaning, if they have, let's say, 4 children, what is the age of your first child? Then what is the age of your second child? What is the age of your third child? What is the age of your 4th child? Okay, so that's how this loop and merge is gonna work. All right, how do I do that? Again, if you wanna turn on loop and merge, it's over here. I've already got it turned on, so let's go into the menu. So let me turn it off, just so you can see from the beginning. All right, so we wanna loop it based off of a question. How many children do you have? And it's a numeric response. There's literally no other choice I can pick because it's just a field, all right? And you can decide here what you want it to be, the maximum number of times or children you want them to have in the survey. You might want this to be much higher than 5. People do have more than 5 kids, but in this case, I'm just gonna do 5, all right? And then when you do that, it fills out this first field with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I had made the max number of loops higher, it would be higher than 5, okay? And then in field number 2, this is usually blank. But what happens is this. So if I just did a loop and merge and then like input with the pipe text, this number here, it would look a little awkward, right? Because it would end up being, what is the age of your 1 child? Okay, but that's not what I want. I want, what is the age of your first child, because it's more grammatically correct. So if I go back into loop and merge, in field 2, I can actually just kind of put in those little grammatical fixes, and got first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I'm gonna save that. And here, we'll do the pipe text again from the beginning. So we're gonna do pipe text, loop and merge fields. We're gonna do 1, and then right after it, we're gonna do the second field. Space that out a little bit. So let's try what this is gonna look like. How many children do you have? I'm just gonna say 2 in this case. What's the age of your first child? So I'm gonna put under 2 years, or actually if they're the older child, I'll make them a little older. I'll make them 11 to 15. What is the age of your second child? So that's that pipe text working for me very well. I'm gonna say 2 to 5. And because I only picked 2 children, the survey is over, all right? So that's how you can use inputting a numeric value to work for you as well in research surveys with loop and merge. Bridget, any questions about loop and merge before I move on to the last part?
That was amazing. Bravo. So cool. Okay, we have one comment from Andy saying, LOL, I'm really enjoying these Dr. House and Dr. Quinn examples.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Agree.
I was trying to find doctors that hopefully everybody knew.
I want you to rate Dr. Lecter next, please.
That one was a little scary, but I'm glad that you at least saw it and appreciated it.
Cool, that's all we have, so I think you're good to keep going.
Okay. So the one final thing that I'm gonna show you is actually how to use authentication. And again, this is perfect if you're just doing an internal survey with maybe your department, and you know that everyone has a seaweed and password. Everybody works for Weill Cornell Medicine. This will not work so well if you have people outside of the organization taking the survey, because it might bump them out. There's no way for them to authenticate, all right? So let me really quickly go right here. So I've got a really simple descriptive survey where it says, hi blank, I want that to be somebody's first name. Thanks for taking our survey. Please confirm that this information is correct before continuing. And I want full name, seaweed, and email, all right? How do I pull that information when somebody you know, is trying to take my survey. Normally, you might do a form question, which is fine, where you just have them fill in all that information. But, you know, sometimes human error happens and people mistype their email, they mistype their name, they mistype, you know, a phone number. And then you're kind of left like, oh, well, I don't know what information, what to do with this information. It is now useless. So you can actually pull that data from our own authentication system, which you always see when you log into any survey or any application at Weill Cornell. So you would have to go into something called Survey Flow. Survey Flow, if I had multiple blocks, shows me kind of a map of what my entire survey looks like. And then I can kind of decide how I want the survey to flow, which is why it's called that, depending on how a you know, respondent takes it. So you'll notice that there are a couple of things going on. Right now I just have the block, but I have something where I can add new elements and some things over here. So I want to actually add a new element. And you'll see that there are a couple of things here. But for authentication, at least with our system, you need two things, one of which is embedded data, and then later you need to use our authenticator. So embedded data, what does that mean? Embedded data is the information you're looking for. And usually when you use our authentication system, by default, you get 4 things, all right? So these are the things that you want to look for, and they kind of have to look in this exact way, but I will also send you, you know, the format of what it needs to look like so you can try it on your own. So the embedded data is going to be first name, so you always want that, and there's no space in between. Then you want their last name, and then you want their email, and their seaweed, why not? So those are like 4 default things that you can ask for, all right? I am going to then move this above my question block. Or actually, maybe I'll just, oops. Maybe I'll move this below. Might be a little easier. Yes, okay. So embedded data goes first, then my little question block, and then I want to add my authenticator. So this asks you, well, what kind of security authentication login system are you using at Weill Cornell? And then we are using something called single sign-on, also known as SSO. And then I want to capture everybody's information here using embedded data. So you, in the first field, you would just write the embedded data that you want, and then you have to actually use the codes or fields that we use in our system. And then you add another one. And again, I'm gonna share this with you guys so you don't have to remember it like right now. But these are basically little codes that are very useful for you to pull data. All right, and then last one, which is, I think it's just seaweed, yep. And then our SSO type is called shibboleth. And then you're done, essentially. You save the flow, and I just wanna go into a survey where this is already working. So let me go into this one. Yeah, this is the one I believe. And then I wanna take this survey. So let me go get the link for it. Give me 1 second. So I already actually signed into our SSO today. So it already pulled the data for me, all right? So this is all of my information. Qualtrics pulled it. And then when I go into my data and analysis, all that information is gonna be saved for me when I export it into Excel. So I didn't have to do much work. I set up some stuff ahead of time, and now I know I'm gonna get consistent information anytime someone logs into my survey. It's gonna pull it directly from our login system, and then you just have it. You can also do some coding, which I'll send out because I'm running a little short on time, to pull other information like somebody's title and things like that. I'll actually send you how to set that up as well. But it's actually a really cool trick that you can use to just very easily pull everyone's information in a very consistent way. And you have all the correct data because it's in our system correctly. And it's just easy to just set it up and go. I will spend the last few minutes, and if I need to take a little more time, that's fine because I know we're running low on our minutes here. But Bridget, are there any other questions about things that I showed during the session?
Yeah, a question from Michele. Hey, Michele, he wonders, can you require authentication but still keep it anonymous?
No, I mean, unless you can't really, because you always have to pull some kind of data from them. So it's not going to be anonymous, really. I mean, I don't know what you would pull that wouldn't make it anonymous, because you're pulling things that you would find like in the directory, and that's all, you know, identifiable information. So I don't think that you can, Michele.
He asked, why do you need to pull?
Why do I need to pull? Well, this is just well, this is just if I'm pulling from SAML. I mean, there's only so many fields that I can pull from. So this would be a use case of like, well, I've done surveys where I've done a survey for the ITS department, and then I just wanted to make sure I got everybody's correct information. So I pulled like first name, last name, and seaweed. So that's maybe a scenario where you would want to pull. But if you didn't want to use anybody's information, I mean, you definitely don't have to do this. You can make it completely anonymous. So.
Cool. I think that's it for questions that I see right now.
Oh, okay. Well, if you guys have any more questions after this session, that's totally fine. Again, I'm going to send you the video of everything that we did today, some links that I hope are helpful. Basically, they're the same use case scenarios that I did with you today. They'll just be, you know, guides that you can use to look up anytime you want. And then again, if you have more questions, just, you know, when you get my email, you can just reply, and hopefully I can help. I know there's always a lot of different use case scenarios. They're not all the same. So there might be little tweaks that you might have to do here and there. But overall, like, there's so many things that you can do with these 3 tools, just to make your surveys a little more sophisticated and provide you more useful information at the end of the day. So I hope that you guys found this helpful.
We have one more question from Brooke. Vanessa, I don't know if you want to stay on or catch up with Brooke after the session.
Well, you can ask the question. If people need to sign up, that's fine, but I'm happy to answer Brooke's question.
You stay on? Okay, sounds good. Can you embed data using an Excel spreadsheet and loop and merge? For example, if I teach 5 classes and I want to update the description for each class in the same survey, can I import the CSV and each loop will pull the specific info for each course?
So yes, you can, but I actually might want to talk with you after this, because that requires a little bit of setup that, you know, I don't want to take too much more time. But Brooke, I'm happy to meet with you afterward. And if it's in the chat, it's being recorded, so I'll just find your name in there. And then, you know, you can reach out to me when I send out the info, the follow-up info.
She says that works. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Well, if there are no more questions, I guess I will wrap this up. But again, thank you so much for attending the session. We do have a part 2 next week. Bridget's going to be talking about some other aspects of Qualtrics, particularly text analysis. That's really cool. So if you want to learn more about Qualtrics, meet us at the same time next week. Really appreciate you guys attending these sessions. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.